I'm super stoked because today I'm going to talk about a book that I think is very influential to me, that I recently read, and that I think is super fascinating and worth talking about. And that is the book High Conflict by Amanda Ripley, which was actually a book that I discovered from Big Think, which is on YouTube, and which features interviews with a variety of journalists and writers and thinkers and intellectuals, and included Amanda Ripley. So the first thing I want to describe that I think that she talks about that I think is really helpful is the idea of looping. And looping is interesting because I don't know that it's necessarily her concept specifically. I think it's something that she has understood and something that she articulates in this book, but it's also called looping for understanding. And the idea is pretty simple and pretty straightforward. You can even look it up on the internet, looping for understanding, and it should pull up a summary of what it means to be able to follow the steps. But basically, to make a long story short, with looping or looping for understanding, you try to mediate conflict by nipping it in the bud. And you do this by being on the same page as someone else. So when someone says something that we disagree with or that we don't like or that we want to push back against, we tend to not be listening. We tend to not listen to each other. In fact, I believe Amanda Ripley in this book actually described how a lot of people don't even listen to each other. A lot of people feel as though they aren't being listened to. And so with looping for understanding, you have this ability to show that you're at least hearing what someone has said. And this is good, and I think can even be disarming because you're allowing yourself to listen to what they're saying in real time, but you're also showing this person that you are listening. And I think that this is a great idea. Now, what you do is very straightforward. You just repeat what they said in your own terms, in your own words. And you do this in order to try to understand what they're saying, but understand what they're saying from your own perspective. And the reason why this is important is because if the other person feels heard, they might say something like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. And you always want to double check and make sure that what they're saying is what they're actually saying. So you might follow up with something like, so what I hear you saying is, and this individual can confirm whether or not that's actually true. And if that's what they're saying, and if they're wrong, if you're wrong, I should say, then you want to correct yourself and be able to share the idea that you're still listening and continue to try to iterate what they are saying in your own words. Now, the other part of this is that you don't necessarily have to agree with them, but looping for understanding is allowing space for a person to be heard. And it allows space for that peace. I think it's really difficult and complicated in today's society because it does seem as if there's a lot of contention and controversy. It does seem as though we are talking past each other. So I think, even though it's counterintuitive, I think it makes sense to just pause, and before you respond, you just make sure that you're on the same page, that you understand what the other person is saying. The point that I want to illustrate is that I've noticed in my own life when I get in arguments or problem discussions, you could say, this is because I am not looping. And I actually find looping to be very counterintuitive, mostly because it's not really what I would have expected to say. My general tendency is to actually get defensive. And I think it's really interesting that this is such a deeply rooted thing of human nature, that we have a hard time capturing a sense of what the other person is saying, and that we have a really hard time being aware of what we are saying to each other. And so, while I want to acknowledge that this skill is very difficult, you have to practice it, you have to pause and really implement it, something that I will admit I've struggled to do, that I think that it is a valuable tool. And I think it's something to keep in your back pocket and to keep on the back burner. Because you never know how you can change a course by thinking about what someone is saying, by looping for understanding, and by being someone who listens to what the other person is saying. I think that this is incredibly helpful in a time where things are very contentious and controversial and problematic. I think this skill is very important.